When news of Gene Hackman's death spread across Hollywood, the entire film industry seemed to come to a standstill. He was a living legend, a symbol of powerful presence and unforgettable performances. At over 90 years old, Hackman's passing wasn't exactly unexpected. But what stunned the world was how he passed away. His body was found in his own home, beside his wife Betsy Arakawa, and one of their beloved dogs. There were no signs of struggle, no clear cause, just a death so silent it sent chills down the spine. But that silence was quickly shattered by a single sentence from his closest friend, Robert Duvall. "I tried to warn everyone." Warn them about what? And why now? Had Hackman been hiding something throughout his entire career? Or was his death the final chapter in a long chain of tragedies that few ever dared to touch? In this video, we'll follow the trail of missing pieces to uncover a haunting question. Gene Hackman, who was he really? And what exactly happened during his final days? A friendship forged in struggle. Before the world knew Gene Hackman and Robert Duvall as two monuments of American cinema, they were just two lonely young men feeling their way through a harsh world called the entertainment industry. They had nothing in their hands but dreams, determination, and a burning desire to be recognized. And fate brought them together at the very beginning of Doubt. Pasadena Playhouse, one of the most prestigious acting schools at the time. But for Hackman, from the very first days, he was an outsider. He didn't fit in. Older than most of the other students, a former Marine carrying a tough and cold demeanor, he didn't hide his bluntness, didn't try to please others, and didn't bother concealing his dissatisfaction with the rigid expectations of the acting program. After just 3 months, he was expelled. The reason? You don't have what it takes to succeed. A cruel verdict for any dream that had just begun to bloom. But instead of collapsing, Hackman turned that humiliation into fire. A fire that burned quietly inside him for decades to come. Duvall was different. He wasn't pushed out of the school gates, but he didn't fully belong either. Amidst the classes, rehearsals, and the evaluative stares from instructors, he and Hackman found a quiet understanding in each other. A kind of unspoken empathy about always being seen as outsiders, always having to prove they deserved to be there. Hackman was tall, with a deep, powerful voice and a presence that was unmistakable. But it wasn't the kind of image Hollywood wanted. He didn't have the star face, the soft charm, and his intensity made many directors uneasy rather than intrigued. Duvall didn't have it any easier. Despite his obvious talent, he still struggled with rejection and the biased perspectives of an industry that only wanted what was predictable and easy to mold. But they didn't give up. And it was during those stifling early days that a friendship was formed. Not loud, not flashy, but solid, like steel forged in fire and pressure. Two strangers, two contrasting personalities, both pushed to the fringes of expectation. They found each other a pillar of support, not just to survive, but to believe. If no one gives us a chance, we'll create our own. Outsiders are not welcomed. Gene Hackman left Pasadena in silence, carrying a wounded pride and a heart that had never bowed down. No one opened the door to welcome him. There were no promises, no opportunities. Only one thing kept pushing him forward, the belief that he had to succeed, even if it meant breaking the door down. He chose New York, the city that never sleeps, where dreamers come to be crushed, or to become legends. And Hackman arrived with empty hands, an iron will, and no safety net beneath him. Duvall followed not long after. But by the time he set foot in the city, Hackman had already built himself a small but solid life. A cramped apartment, a few odd jobs, and a spirit that refused to yield. Money was always an unsolved problem. They got by with whatever jobs they could find, typing, moving furniture, guarding doors of buildings they could never afford. But for them, those were the only levers to keep their dream alive. In Hackman's tiny kitchen, Dustin Hoffman, a skinny, unknown young actor, slept on the floor for weeks. When there was no more space, Hoffman moved in with Duvall. These men, Hackman, Duvall, Hoffman, were not just friends. They were comrades, bound by a desperate hunger, not just to survive, but to be seen. And in the darkness of poverty and rejection, the friendship between Hackman and Duvall was forged. Not through promises, but through endurance. Through the pain of being underestimated. And through an unshakable belief that we have something special, and one day the world will know it. Gene Hackman, a man on the edge. But while Duvall lived with patience and calm, Hackman carried within him a storm that never ceased. He wasn't simply a man with talent. He was someone who lived with energy constantly on the verge of eruption. Discipline, determination, and a constant tension, like an over-tightened string. He knew he had talent, but he also knew that no one was going to hand him a chance unless he fought for it. And so, he never hesitated to speak the truth, to confront anyone, to walk away from anything that didn't align with his vision. Hackman didn't just fight for roles, he fought for respect. And in those late-night conversations with Duvall, when their dreams were still just dreams, there was always something simmering. Tension. A current ran silently between them. A feeling that Hackman was inching closer and closer to the edge, where greatness and destruction are only a step apart. Duvall, with his quiet and sensitive nature, saw it clearly. He noticed the growing coldness in his friend's eyes, the sudden bursts of anger, the unexplained fits of rage. And he knew. The fire that made Hackman was also the fire that could burn everything down. He wasn't who people thought he was. Robert Duvall was not someone who spoke lightly. But when he talked about Hackman, his words carried more weight than ever. He wasn't who people thought he was. That wasn't criticism, it was a warning. A whisper heavy with memory, bitterness, and a truth that had never been fully spoken. On screen, Hackman was fierce. But in real life, he was even more so. He didn't play the explosive man. He was the explosion. And sometimes, that intensity pushed him to the very edge, where brilliance meets collapse. An edge that only those truly close to him, like Robert Duvall, recognized long before the rest of the world did. Before it was revealed through a deeply mysterious death. A man marked by a wound that never healed. Gene Hackman was a man of contradictions. On screen, he was a Hollywood icon, a leading actor who could make any character come alive, haunting and unforgettable. But behind the lens, behind the glare of the spotlight, was a completely different Gene Hackman. Restless, short-tempered, and sometimes quietly dangerous. Robert Duvall saw it early on. Hackman wasn't just a gifted artist. He was a man who carried a tightly wound energy inside him. The difficult early years hadn't hardened him into steel. They had left cracks that stretched all the way to the peak of fame. Many people mellow with age, but Hackman? The rage inside him never eased. It grew along with his fame. On set, he demanded perfection to the point of extremity. He was known for frequent clashes with directors and colleagues because he couldn't stand incompetence and refused to tolerate anything beneath the standard he expected. That perfectionism made him great, but it also made him a source of fear for those who worked with him. They called him Vuvius, a nickname born from smoldering anger, repressed and waiting to explode. And Duvall, his longtime friend, saw it all. The clenched fists, the eyes that turned cold, the voice as sharp as a blade. But there was something deeper than rage. Hackman carried within him a wound that never healed. A father who walked away, a childhood abandoned, and a society that once saw him as a failure. Even after winning 2 Oscars, even after the world praised him as a legend, Hackman never forgot. And perhaps he couldn't forget. Duvall once said, "I tried to warn everyone." The warning wasn't just about the anger, it was about isolation, something that sank deeper and deeper into Hackman's soul. He gradually withdrew from the world, even from those once closest to him. In the final years of his life, even Robert Duvall could no longer reach him. A life in hiding and a death without answers. When Gene Hackman announced his retirement in 2004, all of Hollywood felt a sense of loss. But the unusual part wasn't the decision to leave the screen, it was how he completely disappeared. No events, no goodbyes, no nostalgia. He simply vanished. He cut off contact with friends and colleagues. He retreated to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where he controlled everything, including his own solitude. No invitations to events, no reflective interviews, no handshakes with old faces. To Hackman, Hollywood was a chapter that had closed. Permanently. Many believed he had grown tired of the industry's shallowness. Others thought his heart condition had prompted the withdrawal. But those who truly knew him, especially Duvall, always felt there was something deeper, something that was never spoken aloud. Then one quiet morning, the news hit like a punch to the chest. Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, had been found dead in their home. A death that shocked all of Hollywood. The scene inside the house was strange. So quiet, it felt unnatural. No signs of struggle, no visible wounds, no clear cause of death. As if time itself had stopped. They were found together, along with one of their beloved dogs. But the detail that sent chills down investigators' spines came from Hackman's pacemaker. The device showed that his last recorded heartbeat was 9 days before his body was discovered. Hackman had been dead for nearly 10 days, and no one knew. He had lived a life of isolation, and he died in that very same isolation. At first, carbon monoxide poisoning was suspected, but thorough tests revealed no trace of it. The house contained numerous prescription medications, some untouched, others half-used. Accident? Suicide? Or was there something even darker behind their deaths? In the end, officials concluded it was a death from natural causes. But those close to Hackman knew it couldn't be that simple. A warning unheeded. Robert Duvall wasn't surprised. He was simply quiet, heartbroken, and repeated what he had said for years. I tried to warn everyone, but no one listened. In the final years of his life, Hackman withdrew, disappeared, and severed all ties with the world he had once conquered. Even Duvall, the friend who had shared hardship with him since their unknown days, could only watch from afar. When he tried to reach out, Hackman responded with absolute silence. It wasn't the usual stubbornness, it was something else. A deliberate rejection of the world, the paradoxical end of a legend. Gene Hackman spent his entire life fighting, not just against the film industry, but against his own pain. He was angry, discontent, but he was also an irreplaceable genius, and perhaps the greatest tragedy lies here. He entered Hollywood with nothing but empty hands, underestimated, told he didn't have what it took to succeed. And he left this world the same way. Alone, in silence, carrying secrets that only those closest to him could even begin to explain.